he's got his angel with him. And that makes all the difference. If you've got that angel with you, if you've got that place of being in love, of being in the transcendent, you know what? Structure, samsara, bring it on.
Welcome to another episode of the Filmosophers movie talk show, Cinema Nirvana edition, in which we have our esteemed Enlightenment Dharma docent Dean, like that alliteration, take us on a tour of some of the great movies, diving deeply into them and discerning Enlightenment lessons. And so, Dean, again, for the uninitiated, maybe you just share with us a little bit the Cinema Nirvana concept and how that relates to the film we're going to look at today, which is the classic 1967 Mike Nichols film, The Graduate.
Okay, do I have to use all words starting with the letter D?
Definitely.
This is a book I wrote in 2005. It's called Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies. And what I do here is I take films that you would never think of as having a spiritual component or enlightenment component, dharma component. And I show that, no, they do have that component because everything does, because the infinite is everywhere. If it wasn't everywhere, it wouldn't be the infinite. If I'd known anything about sports, which I don't, I could have written a book on enlightenment lessons from sports. So I think Phil Jackson has written that book, actually. So, and some of the films that I talk about in the book are The Godfather, Jaws, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and so forth. 15 in all, and we've done several in this series. So today we're going to talk about The Graduate, 1967. Really just one of the great... The word iconic is so overused, but it really is an iconic film in... it's an iconic 60s film. It's an iconic youth film. And those two things are not unrelated. You know, those of you who were around in the 60s and were young in the 60s know that it was a time where the old structures were breaking down. There was a sense of formlessness, a sense that the old structures were gone, and, you know, we might become anything. The politics might become anything, sexuality, family, relationships, all of that, the culture might become anything. It was in this very fluid state. Now, youth is much the same thing in every generation. In adolescence, we're in this in-between place. We're in this transitional place between the limits of childhood and the limits of adulthood. It's a fluid place. And there's a great defining scene early in the film. It starts with Dustin Hoffman as Benjamin Braddock, who's just graduated from college. He's come home, and he's lying on a float, a rubber raft in his parents' swimming pool, and his father asks him what he's doing, and he says, "Drifting. It's very comfortable drifting here in the pool." And that is, you know, that's the very comfortable thing in that transitional time. You're drifting, you're unformed. Interestingly enough, this is very much parallel to what's spelled out in the Bardo Todo, which is in English it's miscalled actually, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is the standard manual in Vajrayana Buddhism for passing through the dying experience and then the transitional experience, what's called the Bardo, the transitional space into one's next birth, or if you really, really get it right, into final enlightenment so you no longer have to take birth. So that also is the place of fluidity, the place of formlessness. And where you want to, the idea is you want to maintain that formlessness. You want to, because that's enlightenment. Enlightenment is non-structured. It's non-structured. Now, here on the earth, most people don't make it. They grasp at something, they take form again, and then they take another birth. And the idea is you keep going through that till you get it right. Then you don't have to come back to school anymore, as it were. You've graduated. You're a real graduate then. So really, we're seeing kind of a portrait of this bardo state that, in a sense, we all go through in adolescence, and that our culture went through in the 60s. Now, when you're in that drifting in the pool state, the transitional state, the formless state, and your parents are telling you, shape up, right? Take a form. There's, of course, there's resistance to that. There's resistance to that. There's, adolescents are famous for rebellion, resistance to authority. Now, interestingly enough, and this is something that I think the film just explores brilliantly, one of the forms that this rebellion takes, that we think is rebellion, is sexuality, right? The old saying goes, every generation thinks they invented sex, right? We always think, oh, now we're getting away with something really subversive. But of course, what it turns out, eventually, we realize that sex is not the escape from into near, temporarily, yeah, it really feels like nirvana. For, orgasm blows your mind. Orgasm is a kind of quasi transcendence, quasi enlightenment, quasi nirvana for a little while. But then what's next? Then, it turns out it's the initiation back into samsara, into another cycle of structure, another cycle of relationship. And pretty soon, you're buying drapes. So what the really kind of brilliant metaphor that conveys all this, and of course, in my cinema nirvana theory, completely unintended by the filmmakers, is Ben's affair with the older woman, Mrs. Robinson, right? The famous line, "Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me, aren't you?" Famous line. In the great shot where Ben is in the middle far distance facing the camera, and he's framed by the kind of silhouette of Mrs. Robinson's bent leg, right? And of course, what that's doing visually is she's trapping him, right? She's a friend of the family. She's another great hilarious line that he says to her, actually, in that same scene, is, "Oh, Mrs. Robinson, I think you're the most attractive of all my parents' friends." She played Mrs. Robinson, by the way, is never given a first name. None of the adults have first names. They're all Mr. and Mrs., which tends to widen the gap between them and the youth. Mrs. Robinson was played brilliantly by Anne Bancroft. And by the way, I made a mistake in this book. It's the only one that I know of. But in that chapter, I say that she won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. She did not. She was nominated. Everyone in this film was nominated. And the only person that won from this film was Mike Nichols for Best Director. So really, what it shows is that sex is the initiation. We think that sex is rebelling against our parents, and it turns out to be the initiation into becoming our parents, becoming, right. There's this incredible montage of Ben hanging around in the summer, being in the pool, being restless, being dissatisfied, all to Simon and Garfunkel tunes. And it ends with him jumping into the pool onto the rubber raft. And then there's a cut, and he's now the rubber raft has been replaced by Mrs. Robinson's body, and the pool has been replaced by the bed. You know, he's like given up that drifting for her. She's going to be the escape. She's going to be the Nirvana, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, is that it? Are we screwed? Are we screwed by the screwing? No, says the film, because then Ben is kind of put on a forced date with Mrs. Robinson's lovely daughter Elaine, played by the very lovely Catherine Ross, and he falls in love with her. He's been completely tense. You know, going back to the very opening of the film, the very first shot, boy, does this grab you. It's a close-up of Ben's face with this impassive look. He looks like he's under anesthesia or something against this stark white background. Again, this idea of unformed. He could be anywhere. Could be anything going on, nothing going on. And then the camera pulls back and we see that it's a pillow. He's on an airplane and he's surrounded by adults. And the adults all have all look dead. So right there, it's like, oh, is this his fate? Is this his inescapable destiny that he's flying toward? And then in the next scene, which is the credit sequence, he's on the conveyor belt that they used to have at LAX. When you get off the plane, you're going into the terminal, over the sound of Simon and Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence, and there's the recorded voice droning over and over. Please to hold the handrail, please stay to the right, to pass, please go to the left, something like that. And he's still got this Buster Keaton deadpan look on his face. And it's like he's a manufactured object on a conveyor belt. Again, is this the destiny that he's stuck with? Is this what happens when you graduate from college? You go into the adult world. The most famous line in the whole film is one word. The family friend who takes him aside by the pool and he says, Benjamin, one word of advice. And what is it, Chris?
Plastics.
Plastics.
And where did they come? They came all the way from Tarzana. Remember, yeah.
What? Who? What?
The mother, when the mother introduces Ben to.
Oh.
And I don't remember the guy's name, but you remember so-and-so? They came all the way from Tarzana.
All the way from Tarzana, your hometown.
My hometown, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, back to plastics.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Tarzana is important because Tarzana was named. Why is it named Tarzana, Chris?
It was the home of Edgar Rice Burroughs.
That's right.
Author of the Tarzan series.
That's right.
And the city that bears his name.
That's right. I think you should bear that name proudly.
I do.
Right. You know, me, I was Sherman Oaks. Who the hell was Sherman?
Who was Sherman? I don't know.
General Sherman? Did he march that far? What were we talking about?
Plastics.
Plastics. That's right. That's right. Right. There's a great future in plastics, Ben. Enough said. Just between you and me. Enough said. Something like that. And it's like, oh my God, is this really my future? Plastics. Interestingly enough, how are plastics made? They're formless. They're shapeless. They're fluid. Then they're poured into a form, and they're stuck that way. They're stuck in structure. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't think Mike Nichols had this in mind. I don't think Buck Henry, when he wrote the script, had this in mind. I think this stuff is there. It's everywhere because the infinite is everywhere. And when all the pieces happen to just fall into place so nicely like this, then the film or the book or whatever it is becomes a classic. We all respond to it because these elements are working so harmoniously and because they're so strong. We don't know why that's why we don't know why that's why we respond to it that way. The makers of the thing don't know why. You ask the artist what the hell he created, how he did it. It's like asking the hen about the mineral content of the egg that she lays.
But it requires an enlightened intellect to make the hidden obvious.
You're my best friend, Chris. God knows I try. So,
Stop trying.
yes. We do not try.
Continue.
Where are we? So, the Catherine Ross character, Elaine, is the ticket out of the structure, out of doom, right? When he meets her, he's been in this. He is not. I don't think he's had a genuine smile throughout the entire film until he meets her. At first, he resists her. He brings her to a strip club where she's about to be completely humiliated by the stripper, and suddenly he has the epiphany and he shouts, "Stop!" And that's the pivot. That's the turning point of the film. He's been hiding behind sunglasses. He takes off the sunglasses. They go out for burgers. They're suddenly, he's relaxed. He laughs for the first time. And he says, you're the first thing I've liked in such a long time. And that's a line reminiscent of The Catcher in the Rye. Very similar character, similar situation, Holden Caulfield, where near the end of the book, his sister, Phoebe, she's the sage in that book, says, you don't like anything. You don't like anything that's happening. That's the indictment. The indictment is projecting our own negativity, our own toxicity, our own disdain. In the case of adolescents, adolescents are famous for that, for just projecting their own contempt on everyone and everything. And we realize, and it doesn't take much when you're Catherine Ross in 1967 to project, she's the angel, right? She is the angel of romantic love, right? He falls in love with her. Now, isn't that an interesting phrase? In love. Fall in love, right? We fall. We usually we're maintaining our verticality. We know where we're going. There's a certain rigidity to it. There's a certain purposeful striding around. And then when you fall, you're helpless. Right? This is what happens in meditation. This is why there is no trying in meditation, because we fall in meditation. We fall asleep. We fall in love. Right? It's like, falling into the swimming pool. Falling, here we are, we're in this thing together, this thing that's bigger than both of us. And it's more than sex. It has to be more than sex, because, you can't have sex all day. God knows we tried, but you got if you can't find another way to be in love, which really is in the transcendent, somehow together in that space of delight and light and boundlessness together for the other 23 hours of the day, it doesn't work. And I just saw an interview with who was it? Paul Thomas Anderson? I forget, some great director, and he was saying, once I do the casting, that's 90% of the making of the film, right? And you really see this in the case of Catherine Ross. There's so much that does not have to be said, that does not have to be shown. Okay, that's it. We are in love. We are in that place of transcendental delight being shared together. But of course, as we all know from our pursuit of the spiritual path, you get that first glimpse, And usually that's not it, and then happily ever after. You have that one really nice deep meditation, so clear, that's it. Now I'm this, of course, the transcendent is everywhere. Delight is everywhere. There's nothing I need to know or do to be in a state of delight. That's it. I'm never going back. And then you go back. And then sit down, hit the cushion again, right? And so this is played out in the film in the misunderstandings between Ben and Elaine. She leaves. She goes off to Berkeley. Turns out she's engaged to this awful guy from whom Ben has to rescue her. And yada yada yada. They go through all of that. They wind up. I don't want to say too much about the ending because some people haven't seen it, but we do have to mention the last shot of the film because it's very controversial. The end of the film, he has rescued her from her wedding to this other guy. I guess I'm telling you the ending. Okay.
Who hasn't seen
Who
this
hasn't
one?
seen that? Right, that's right. She's still in her wedding dress from the wedding. He's rescued her. They jump onto a bus to make their escape, a city bus, which weirdly is a yellow. It's like a school bus, but it's full of old people. And they go to the back of the bus. And they've just escaped from all the angry relatives and the angry, jilted bridegroom and so forth. And in a sense, we've come full circle because once again, just as in the very first shot of the film, Ben is on this vehicle surrounded by these dispirited old people, these adults. We could say, this is what the film's saying. He's gotten nowhere. He's come full circle. He's joined the adult world. He's as stuck in structure. He's as stuck in samsara. He's as screwed as the rest of us. But he's got his angel with him. And that makes all the difference. If you've got that angel with you, if you've got that place of being in love, of being in the transcendent, you know what? Structure, samsara, bring it on. No problem being in structure. This is the solution. This is the solution. We can't run away from structure. We can't, every time we breathe in and we breathe out, we're participating in the world of forms. And yet we all have this craving for boundless freedom, for formlessness. How do you have them together? How do you integrate them? How do you the classic text on this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 48. Yogastha kuru karmani, established in union with the infinite, vigorously participate in the finite. Right? And you can do that. It's called being enlightened, being in love in the truest sense, in the deepest sense. And then it's all fine. And you see that in their hearty laugh. Now, Mike Nichols himself actually joined the chorus of critics who said, nah, they're screwed. That bus is taking them to become just like their parents. But I don't care what Mike Nichols says. What does he know? He's the director. That's not what is on the screen. What's on the screen, playing once again to the sounds of silence. At the beginning of the film, the words of that song are very ambivalent because there's all this stuff about, silence like a cancer grows. It's very, like silence is something negative. But there's also these words, the vision that was planted in my brain still remains, that it's something ineffable. It's something, it's the transcendent. And I believe that the film goes from that kind of, toxic, awkward, awful, lonely silence at the beginning to the silence of love where you don't say anything because there's nothing you got to say.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the movie.
Yeah.
Because it's it's a new beginning
Yeah.
for her, having left the certainty of the fate that awaited her to the uncertainty of being with this young man she barely knows, and the fulfillment of for Benjamin of attaining the prize he's been seeking, and relentlessly, right?
Yes.
Because once he sets his mind on her, he pursues her um, with ultimate focus. He stalks her on the campus of UC Berkeley.
Yes.
The scene where he runs down the street on the sidewalk to casually get on the bus and have his chance encounter with her.
Right.
He really pursues her relentlessly, and yet, in a way, looking at through your lens, it is, just replacing one object identification with another. In one sense, he leaves the relationship with Mrs. Robinson, which is toxic. It is his initiation into adulthood in a way.
Yes.
Right. That sexual relationship with her, but it's empty. It's hollow. He tries to engage her in conversation, with that wonderful conversation with her in the bed, where he wants to talk with her and she doesn't want to engage. Yeah. And so there becomes that self-loathing.
It does come out in the conversation with Mrs. Robinson that she was an art student, that she was in love with art. And then what happened was she had her one wild, free moment in the backseat of a Ford where Elaine was conceived. And then she wound up again stuck in this just mindless alcoholic stew of a suburban life.
All the dreams had to be abandoned and buried, and she was reticent to revisit them, even in conversation.
Yeah.
So
we see the theme echoed. We're seeing that, this is what happens generation after generation. From the Vajrayana point of view, this is what happens lifetime after lifetime until we get it right.
Yeah, but Elaine, with her just doe-eyed innocence, sweetness, and angelic,
so pure.
She represents that chance.
Yes,
yes.
So as you're saying, that his relentless pursuit of her, on one level, we could say, okay, he's just replacing one limiting object with another. But if we accept the metaphorical schema that I'm proposing here, what she represents is not another object. She represents the transcendence of objects.
Very good. I like that.
Okay. Good.
And they make their exit in a school bus, but the school bus is filled with older people.
Yeah.
I always thought there was something going on there. I never quite. It was almost subliminal.
Yeah, and what I think it is, it's kind of saying, okay, this is all of life right here. This is from childhood, when you're in the little yellow school bus, till and they're old people. They are senior citizens. This is it. This is your life. But the thing is, I think it has to be a school bus, because they go to the back of the bus. That's where the bad kids sit. That's where the rowdy kids sit. The kids who are not well behaved. So that's showing that, okay, even if it looks like, okay, now they're going to be married, and they got to live in a house somewhere, they got to make a living somewhere, they're going to be stuck in samsara, but they got this rowdiness, they've got this boundary busting spirit, which is how they've come together. And for those of us who went through the 60s, coming back on the generational level, yeah, okay, the 60s are over. The 60s were a bust in a lot of ways, but there's something that happened there. There's some threads of the way people are, the freedom of the ways people can be in their lives and be together, and there is for those of you who can remember, there's something that did change in the 60s. It was not all a bust. There's, to some degree, we found the angel there, and she's still with us.
Yeah, beautiful. There was too that I think that signature quality of youth, of our youthful time in the 60s, of questioning. And when I think of it, the characters played so wonderfully by William Daniels, and I don't remember the name of the actress who played Benjamin's mother, but they're so bought in, and they are so unquestioning, but they relish in all the material enjoyments, and in cocktail hour, and the pool, and all the joys of affluence and success. And really in an unquestioning way. And their son, they wanted their son to kind of join the parade, right? And he's questioning.
Yeah, and that comes out in the early scene. I think it's the first scene where we see Benjamin in his home. He's upstairs in his old bedroom, famously with the fish tank behind him. And the party, which is to celebrate his graduation with all the tinkling cocktail glasses, is going on downstairs, and he's kind of hiding out upstairs. And his father comes into the room, and he to ask him what's wrong, and he says, "I'm worried." He says, "Worried about what?" He says, "About my future." The father says, "What about it?" He says, "I want it to be what? Different." Right? And it's never said in the film different from what, but it's clear different from what's waiting for me downstairs, different from you, Dad, and you, Mom, different from I don't want to be stuck in this kind of mindless suburban, materialist, shallow kind of existence. Different. And life since the 60s is same but different. Life after, you've done some meditation and found that clarity, found that transcendence, it's same. You still get up, you go to your job, you do what you do, but it's different. The way of relating to it, the way of being in it is the rigidity, the claustrophobia of it somehow incrementally and sometimes dramatically just melts away.
Yeah. You can be in it, but not of it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, something else I was just thinking about too, Dean. I can't imagine that film being what it is without the Simon and Garfunkel soundtrack.
Right.
And how remarkable it was, how that music melded so beautifully, and all the song choices, all the musical choices with the movie. And I was just trying to reflect on what, examples of that have been as kind of that perfect melding. And I'm thinking of the Cat Stevens soundtrack for Harold and Maude.
Yes. Yes.
The Bee Gees and Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, yes.
There are a couple where the music, and it's one artist.
Yes.
Not many artists, but one artist music,
right,
that is married to the film.
Yes.
And the Graduate is really remarkable to me also for that.
Yes.
For that fact.
And it's interesting because there's a synergistic thing going on there, because I feel, and even at the time, even in the 60s, I felt that those Paul Simon lyrics from that era, later on he became more sophisticated, but that they're pretty sophomoric. But that really works because they kind of evoke the pimply awkwardness of adolescence, and that enhances the poignancy of everything that Ben is going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay.
I
think we've done it.
Okay. And if you haven't seen The Graduate, ladies and gentlemen, I guess you don't have to now.
No, you have to now.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
So thanks for joining us on this episode of Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us on the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. Please subscribe to stay up to date on our newest episodes.